I'm Nima Rajan. The Secretary General of the United Nations says in a new report that they must sound the death knell for coal and fossil fuels. This is seen by some to raise renewed questions about the long-term viability of Canada's traditional energy sector. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh claims that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has gone easy on big polluters.
I think this question of the climate crisis is where we see the greatest example of Justin Trudeau's all talk and no action. He is the only leader of a G7 nation who has taken power in 2015 that is governed, that has been in power and overseen an increase in emissions. Of any other G7 nation, he's the only leader that has actually increased emissions while he's been in power.
The UN scientific report says Earth is heating up so quickly due to human activity that temperatures in about a decade will surpass a level of warming that world leaders have sought to prevent. Well, the Green Party has had another shakeup among its top officials. Two senior sources tell the Canadian press that leader Annamie Paul's interim chief of staff, Phil Spittle, was laid off by party brass last week. Mr. Spittle, who headed Ms. Paul's leadership campaign and has worked with the Greens for 2 decades, was on paid leave this summer. This was during negotiations for a contract to become national campaign director. The talks were with Doug Tingey, who oversaw the party purse strings until a couple of days ago when he abruptly stepped down. Well, you can add 3 more to the count of Liberal MPs who will not be running in the next federal election. With Adam Vaughan, Will Amos and Karen McCrimmon announcing their intentions, the total number of incumbent Liberals who won't be seeking re-election climbs to 12. The Grits announced a trio of ready replacements to pick up and carry the party banner. The Trudeau government is being urged not to reinstate Admiral Art MacDonald as Canada's top military commander. That's despite police opting not to lay any charges after a 6-month investigation into an accusation of alleged misconduct. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan have not commented since military police announced their decision. The CBC has reported the probe was related to an allegation of sexual misconduct dating back to Admiral MacDonald's time commanding a Canadian warship in 2010. The Canadian Human Rights Commission says Ottawa is violating its obligations toward Indigenous peoples during treaty negotiations with Labrador's Innu Nation. A new report, co-authored by Celeste McKay, calls on the federal government to abandon its negotiation positions and let the decades-long treaty talks finally be settled. Talks between Ottawa and the Innu Nation stalled in 1996. The report concludes that the federal government should aim to finish negotiations within 3 years. A Canadian man's appeal of his death sentence has been denied by a Chinese court. The Trudeau government has condemned the ruling against Robert Schellenberg and appealed for clemency. Foreign Affairs Minister Marc Garneau says in a statement that Canada opposes the death penalty in all cases. Mr. Schellenberg was convicted of drug smuggling in China and sentenced to prison in November of 2018. But his sentence was abruptly upgraded to death just weeks after Canada arrested a Chinese tech executive at Vancouver's airport. Meanwhile, lawyers for Huawei's detained chief finance official say the only appropriate remedy for a range of abuses in her extradition case is for proceedings to be stayed. Defense lawyer Tony Paisana yesterday urged the BC Supreme Court judge to consider 4 alleged abuses of process as branches of the same tree. The alleged abuses include the way Ms. Meng Wanzhou was questioned and arrested at Vancouver's airport. Lawyers for Canada's Attorney General have denied that any abuse of process occurred. The judge will hear final arguments in the next few weeks over whether Ms. Meng should be extradited. Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne has announced that a key player in the vaccine production sector is coming to Canada. Speaking in Montreal this morning, he says Moderna will set up a highly advanced facility to manufacture mRNA vaccines on Canadian soil. Minister Champagne says it will help the country in the case of a pandemic and will allow Canadians to become more resilient and play a role in global health. The government has promised $2.2 billion for biotechnology research and commercial production over the next 7 years. Canada has lifted its ban on Americans crossing the border to shop, visit, or take vacation. The land border reopened to fully vaccinated Americans for non-essential travel on Monday. The U.S. land border is still closed to Canadians for non-essential trips until at least August 21st. This ban also applies to the Mexican border. All right, stay with us. We will take a look at Afghanistan and the Taliban's territorial gains following the withdrawal of U.S. and coalition troops from the country. An interview with Bill Roggio, senior fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, on what it means for the country up next. We'll have that interview and, of course, more news from around the world on the Forum Daily. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after these short messages from our sponsors. The Taliban took over another provincial capital in Afghanistan yesterday, pressing on with their relentless offensive as American and coalition forces finalized their pullout from the war-torn country. The city of Abac has fallen to the Mujahideen. This was confirmed by Samangan's provincial deputy governor, who said the Taliban is in full control of the city. This is the 6th provincial capital to fall in 4 days. The militants have ramped up their push across much of Afghanistan in recent weeks. 158 Canadian soldiers died during the Afghanistan mission. Thousands more were wounded physically and mentally, which led to additional deaths by suicide. Well, joining us now to discuss the ongoing and developing situation in Afghanistan is Mr. Bill Roggio, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and the editor of FDD's Long War Journal. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So can you give us a quick overview of the situation in Afghanistan as coalition forces pull out of the country?
Yeah, the situation is quite dire. And today, the Taliban took over 2 more provincial capitals, Forest City and Pul-e-Kermi in Baghlan province. So the Taliban now controls 8 provincial capitals. There's 34 total. 4 provinces are fully under Taliban control. That means they control the capital and all of the districts. As far as there's 407 districts in Afghanistan, the Taliban controls 230 of those as of this time. The situation is extremely fluid and difficult to track. The Taliban are on the offensive. They're taking control of large areas of the north. This is where the major Afghan power brokers are based. And without that base of power, the Afghan government is in dire straits right now. The situation, if things continue down this path, the government could collapse within 3 to 6 months, if not sooner.
And how strategically significant are these territorial gains made by the Taliban, sir?
Very significant. In the case of what's happening in Western Afghanistan, so with the Taliban, all of these capitals, it's not in the south and the east as many might have predicted. The Taliban focused their efforts in the north and the west while pressing their offensive on southern provincial capitals in Helmand and in Kandahar. They're fighting there, tying up Afghan forces. But meanwhile, they're taking control of the west and the north. And again, this puts the power brokers in a very difficult position. And now the cities of Mazar-e-Sharif and Herat, they're under direct Taliban threat. The Taliban is pressing offensives there. The Taliban is tightening the noose around these cities, and they're working their way towards Kabul. It's again, the situation is quite dire. I have not seen the Afghan government, the Afghan military, do anything to be able to stop this advance. They're clinging to control of some cities at this moment.
And what kind of tactics are the Taliban using during these advances?
The Taliban, they're primarily infantry tactics. The Afghan military touts their air force and their commandos, but these are of limited supply. They're very small units. They are elite units. They've been effective, but only on the margins. The Taliban are massing their forces and conducting infantry assaults on these districts and these provincial capitals. The airstrikes might hurt them, but they're not stopping them. And in many cases, the Afghan military and government officials, they're just leaving. That's how the first capital, Zaranj in Nimruz province, fell. They just left. The government officials and the military just left because they were told that they wouldn't get the required air support and other support that was needed. And they knew that the person who was in charge, the governor of Nimruz province, was aware that his time was limited. He could either pick up and leave intact, and his fighters fled to Iran and Pakistan, or they could be overrun by the Taliban.
All right, sir, just about a minute, 20 seconds left here, but are you and other experts surprised at the speed of the Taliban's gains?
Many experts, as a matter of fact, nearly all I've seen are surprised. I haven't. I've been documenting this since 2014, what the Taliban controls and contests in Afghanistan. I've been warning about the Taliban's rural strategy to take over rural districts and then press closer to the center. That's exactly what is happening. So I am not surprised. The Taliban waited for the U.S. to leave, for that announcement that the U.S. was leaving. It flipped the switch, pressed the button, and it's going on the offensive.
And what's your estimates around the future of Afghanistan? Will the Taliban be able to take over the entire country?
Yeah, it's very difficult to assess. But if things do not change, the Taliban will be in control of the country. I would say, again, within 6 months. I can't see how the Afghan government can hold out if it's clinging on to Kabul, if it's surrounded by the Taliban in all of the major provinces.
All right, Mr. Roggio, thank you again for your expertise on Forum Daily, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right, thank you, sir. We've got top stories from across the country coming up next as BC shortens its interval between first and second COVID-19 vaccine doses. The Alberta Premier stands by the Provincial Officer of Health, and Manitoba signs on to the federal $10 a day childcare plan. BC has reported 1,079 new cases of COVID-19 over the last 3 days as the province shortens the interval between first and second doses of vaccine. Invitations are going out for people who may now get their second shot at least 28 days after their first, which is down from 49 days. Nearly 58% of the more than 3,000 active infections in BC are located in the Interior Health Region, where public health restrictions have been reinstated. 82% of eligible BC residents have had at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine, while just over 70% are fully vaccinated. An evacuation order concerning the White Rock Lake wildfire burning in BC between Kamloops and Okanagan Lake has been downgraded to allow some residents in the Falkland area to return home. The BC Wildfire Service says the fire has scorched nearly 560 square kilometers. It is one of about 270 wildfires currently burning across British Columbia as fire crews brace for another stretch of hot and dry weather. Nearly 6,600 properties are under evacuation order. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says it's hardly a revelation that there is a wide range of views on how to best address the challenge of COVID-19. Mr. Kenney was responding to a letter by the Alberta Medical Association section of Pediatrics, which expresses grave concern over Alberta's decision to eliminate COVID-19 testing and tracing and end mandated isolation for positive cases. Mr. Kenney says his government stands by the advice from the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw. The head of a Calgary-based trade group says the world cannot switch to renewables overnight and it still needs fossil fuels. Gurpreet Lyle of the Petroleum Services Association of Canada was responding to a new United Nations climate report. The UN scientific paper says Earth is heating up so quickly due to human activity that temperatures in about a decade will blow past a level of warming that world leaders have sought to prevent. Debbie Baptiste has told a news conference marking the 5th anniversary of the shooting death of her son, COLTEN Boushie, that she misses him and prays for change within the justice system. Mr. Boushie of the Red Pheasant First Nation in Saskatchewan died on August 9th after a vehicle he was riding in went onto a farm near Bigar. The property's owner, Gerald Stanley, testified at trial that his gun accidentally went off, and a jury acquitted him of second-degree murder. Eleanor Sunchild, a lawyer who represents Ms. Baptiste, says the family continues to push for a public inquiry into the case and how RCMP handled it. The Saskatchewan Health Ministry says more than 90% of those testing positive for COVID-19 last month were either unvaccinated or only partially vaccinated. It says all 4 people who died in July after contracting the virus were unvaccinated. 95% of people in intensive care were unvaccinated or partially vaccinated. COVID-19 cases are rising again in the province, with 54 new cases reported yesterday. Manitoba is the latest province signing on to the federal government's plan to implement $10 a day childcare for families by 2023. Federal Minister of Families Ahmed Hussein says the Liberal government is committing $1.2 billion to Manitoba over the next 5 years. Funds will also be used to create 23,000 new early learning and childcare spaces in the province and add extended hours for children whose parents work in the evening. Ontario business groups are calling for vaccine passports to avoid another lockdown as COVID-19 cases rise. Even though Premier Doug Ford has said he can't stand lockdowns, he still won't implement a vaccine certificate system for non-essential activities because he says he doesn't want a split society. Quebec announced last week that it is introducing its own form of vaccine passports. Almost 500 residents have been evacuated from the Wabaseemoong Independent Nations in northwestern Ontario and sent to host communities across the province as threats of wildfires move closer to the area. More than 3,200 people have been forced to leave their homes, and some have already been repatriated back to their communities. 2 new fires are burning in the region, bringing the total number of active wildfires to 119. There is 1 week to go in Nova Scotia's provincial election campaign. While Election Day is August 17th, Elections Nova Scotia says that over 60,000 early votes had been cast as of August 7th. The agency says that at the same point in the 2017 provincial election, a total of over 26,000 early votes had been cast. Newfoundland and Labrador no longer has a mask mandate. This change took effect just after midnight. The province's top public health doctor, Dr. Janice Fitzgerald, says mask wearing is still strongly encouraged. There were no new confirmed cases of COVID-19 yesterday. The province currently has 6 active cases. All right, we take a look at what's making news around the world after the break as the U.S. military makes vaccination a requirement for members. The Mexican cartel threatens a news anchor over her news coverage, and China recalls its ambassador to Lithuania. We'll have these stories and more top international headlines coming up after this break, so stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back. Members of the U.S. military will be required to get the COVID-19 vaccine beginning next month in a bid to help maintain military readiness. The plan, laid out by the Pentagon Monday, was endorsed by President Joe Biden. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the mid-September deadline could be accelerated if the vaccine receives final FDA approval or infection rates keep rising. A video allegedly linked to one of Mexico's most powerful drug cartel is circulating, and it lays out threats to kill a national TV news anchor over what they are calling unfair coverage. The video, circulated on Monday, shows a man who said the message was from the head of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. The message complained that Milenio Television was favoring so-called self-defense groups that are battling the Jalisco cartel, and he singled out anchor Azucena Oresti, threatening to kill her and make her eat her words. China has recalled its ambassador to Lithuania and expelled the Baltic Sea nation's representative to Beijing. The row is over Lithuania's decision to allow self-governing Taiwan to open an office under its own name. Beijing claims Taiwan as its territory without the right to diplomatic recognition. Taiwan and Lithuania agreed last month that the office in the Lithuanian capital will bear the name Taiwan rather than Chinese Taipei. China's foreign ministry on Tuesday called on Lithuania to immediately rectify its wrong decision. Nationwide demonstrations are planned in 78 towns across Poland tonight. The move is against a bill seen as an effort by the country's government to silence an independent U.S.-owned television broadcaster that is often critical of the government. The bill aims to prevent non-European owners from having controlling stakes in Polish media companies. In practice, it would push the U.S. company Discovery Inc. to sell its controlling stake in the broadcaster TVN, which operates many channels, including a dedicated news station. The powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has ripped South Korea for proceeding with military exercises with the U.S. Kim Yo-jong claims the war games are an invasion rehearsal and is warning that the North will work faster to strengthen its preemptive strike capabilities. The U.S. and South Korea have yet to announce details of their drills, which have been canceled or reduced in recent years to foster diplomacy or because of the pandemic. An Iranian man is standing trial in Sweden, charged with grave war crimes and murder during the final phase of the Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s. The trial of Hamid Nouri comes just days after Iran's hardline president Ebrahim Raisi took office as the highest-ranking civilian leader in the Islamic Republic. Mr. Raisi himself took part as a prosecutor in the death commission that executed as many as 5,000 people at the end of Iran's bloody war with Iraq in 1988. The head of Germany's train drivers union says members plan to go on a nationwide strike starting Tuesday night. GDL union chief Klaus Weselski said 95% of union members voted in favor of the action. The union is demanding a 3.2% salary increase and a one-time coronavirus bonus of €600 or $703. German train operator Deutsche Bahn has rejected the demands. It has lost billions since the start of the pandemic and from recent floods that destroyed or damaged railroad tracks. Saudi Arabia has announced the arrest of 207 employees across multiple ministries, including the Interior and Defense ministries. It is the latest sweep in the kingdom by an anti-corruption body empowered by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Those detained were not named, and it was not clear when the arrests were made. The Crown Prince's purge, which began in late 2017, has helped him consolidate power and netted the kingdom $106 billion in assets. Saudi nationals have long complained of rampant corruption and misuse of public funds. Zambia's standing as one of Africa's most stable democracies is being tested this week as current President Edgar Lungu is seeking re-election. A tight race is expected against veteran opposition candidate Hakainde Hichilema. Some analysts say the presidential poll may provoke a political crisis in the southern African country. Mr. Lungu's detractors say he has systematically restricted democratic freedoms by closing some media outlets, detaining opposition politicians, and targeting critics. One of Jeffrey Epstein's longtime accusers has sued Prince Andrew, saying the royal sexually assaulted her when she was 17. The prince is alleged to have abused Miss Giuffre on multiple occasions when she was under the age of 18. In late 2019, Prince Andrew told BBC Newsnight that he never had sex with Miss Giuffre. An eco-friendly UK train company is offering greater incentives for people to stop driving and start traveling via rail. In addition to pledging to plant a tree for every ticket booked, company Trainhugger is planning to donate a third of its revenue to tree planting as well. And that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website or follow us on social media. See you next time, everyone. Take care, Canada.